But all that anybody's so far talking about this weekend is this article put out at The Athletic. Kalyn Kahler wrote it. She's with The Athletic, so let's talk to her. Kalyn, thanks for being here. How are you?
Thank you, Bart. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I think the article that you put out Friday has, well, first of all, there's a tremendous amount of backstory, or anytime you enter the Aaron Rodgers waters, which I'm sure you're well aware of. And there are people like me who, there's another article that might criticize Rodgers in some way. I'm there. Let's do it.
Right.
And then I'm seeing there's people that are like, oh, geez, it's just a hand signal. Oh, Chris Blair, who cares about what Chris Blair has to say? But I think in this article, and we've referenced it a little already on the show, but if you could summarize it as well, it seems like, and Sammy Watkins was a guy who said it directly, there are two offenses with the Packers, one that they install, and then Rodgers' secret hieroglyphics language. And whether I dislike or like Rod, that's a problem to, like, it should be a problem to anybody.
Well, I'll start by saying it is funny how when you write about Aaron Rodgers, well, Packers Twitter in general is just hilarious. Like, if there's anything that's not, like, I just retweeted someone who was like, if it's not a glowing report, it has to be like the worst thing that was ever written. Like, people are calling this a hit piece. It's not a hit piece. Like, nobody was anonymous. All of these guys were totally on the record, and nobody said that, like, Aaron's a terrible person and he's harassing me. And like, that was like not the story at all. I went into the story wanting to know why it's hard for rookies to contribute in this offense, because we've seen historically that he's never really cared to involve them much in the offense, and he's never really had to, because there's always been guys, ones and twos ahead of these rookies, and that changed this season. And we saw through, up until week 10, really until Christian Watson emerged, it was a struggle for these guys to get involved. I mean, injuries were involved, of course, but I was noticing, like, I feel like there's something here. Like, why is it? It feels like it's more complicated for a rookie receiver to get involved here in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers than it is with another team. And, in the past, it had been really hard for rookie receivers in general. But I think in the last 3 or 4 years in the NFL, we've seen a change where these rookie receivers are better prepared than ever to be contributors right away, So that is sort of shifting. So I was like, what is going on here that makes it harder? Like, what makes it more difficult? So that was the premise of the story. And through that, I uncovered some things about, as you mentioned, the signals that he uses. So in the story, there's a whole section about current players. Jordan Love talked about this. Jordan Love confirmed like everything that the former guys said, because a lot of people are tweeting at me like, yeah, of course you talked to Amari Rodgers and Kylan Hill and they have an axe to grind. And it's like, okay, I want to make it clear that I called them. They did not, I never knew them. I had never spoken to them in my life until I called them. I called them and I went after them. They did not come to vent to a reporter. Like, I just happened to pick up the phone and call them. So that's number one. And then Jordan Love backed up everything they said, which is essentially, we've all seen Rodgers play. When he gets to the line of scrimmage, oftentimes he will, do a hand signal, either the helmet tap, or sometimes it's one hand, sometimes it's this, sometimes he just sticks an arm behind his back like that. And you'll see everybody down the line repeat it, all the skill players, when he does it. And I just anecdotally from their last game, I was watching and I didn't actually count how many times he's doing it, but it felt like it was like every third or fourth play he was doing it. So it's pretty regularly that he's doing this during games. And we've all seen him do that, but I'd never heard players talk about it so specifically. And I actually got this story idea in particular. I mean, yes, I was seeing what was happening in games and how the rookies were struggling, but there's another player I was writing about in October for a completely different story, who had spent time on the Packers last season. And, he'd said to me how difficult it was to pick up the signals because it was not officially taught to them. And I just kind of filed that away. And I was like, that's really interesting. Maybe I'll ask some other guys about that. So when I asked other players about that, including Jordan Love, who is currently there, they said, and Romeo Doubs talked about it as well. They said that, they're not officially taught to them because it's something that you don't want other teams to really know about. So they'll wait until the regular season starts, until training camp is over and the off season is over, to really get into them in detail. And every Saturday they have a meeting where it's an offensive meeting on Saturdays. But as part of that meeting, they review the signals and they'll call guys up to the front of the room, 3 or 4 guys each week, and have them repeat back a signal with a word with the call, or vice versa. Like they'll give the call and they need to give the signal. And a lot of these players kind of described it as, really nerve-wracking. I mean, none of them were like, I was mentally tortured by this. It wasn't that. It was like, this was like a day that we knew was kind of scary, because like we have to do our signals, and there wasn't any like crazy consequences if they get them wrong. And guys in the back, veterans, would kind of like, be helping them if they were like stuck. So, but the point of it was that like, these are pretty secretive in the fact that they're not written down anywhere. There's no like handy film cut up to just play them all in a row so you can see them. You have to kind of pick them up during practice. Players told me you have to pick it up by asking Aaron himself or asking veterans in your position group. And the veterans will help you. It's not like they're icing out the other players, but it's just the general idea of like, this is something that's a huge part of this offense, but it's sort of like, we're going to talk about it, but like, we're not really going to spend a ton of time reviewing it and teaching it to you. You had to sort of do that on your own and find the veterans to practice that on your own. And the most interesting thing I think is Chris Blair, who was on the practice squad for a year. He was a receiver. He was released, I believe, in May. He said that sometimes the coaches didn't even know, and they would call the coaches up too during these meetings to do the signals. And there were times where he's like, we'd be watching film as an offense, or as like a position group as receivers, and the coaches would be like, "Oh, that's not the right route," and they'd be like, "No, look at what Aaron did." So they'd have to point out that Aaron actually signaled them to change their route. Otherwise, the coaches like didn't always know. So that kind of shows you how many there are and like how vast this is.
The issue that I, as a fan, have is, so they're like, Rodgers and Davante played a long time together. And of course, over the period of time, Rodgers might be like, all right, Davante, like you have a second sense, or if there's a certain look. Like I do that with Davante. I've built chemistry with him over the years. Or maybe Randall Cobb and I, we remember this one play, and if we see the coverage, we'll be like, all right, this is – so you have the offense, and then you have like these separate things. The fact that Rodgers – this is what bothers me. The fact that Rodgers has like this hidden code, and he's not even going to tell you. Yeah. It's up to you to like learn it. Again, you write an article, and then it gets through the Twitter washer and dryer, and the nuance disappears very quickly. And it becomes a very binary thing. I saw someone tweet this morning, is everyone still mad about hand signals? Well, no. Hand signals are like everyone does.
Right.
You have your Omahas, and you have like there's yes. Right. But Rodgers is like, he's invented a language.
Right.
And he's not going to teach you. It just seems so unnecessary. But I think it is, from this outsider looking in, it's a good encapsulation into like who Rodgers might be and who he thinks he is. It's another thing where Rodgers is doing something totally unnecessary, and we've seen it's been a hindrance to a lot of these young guys.
Yeah, and somebody tweeted at me today. I hadn't seen this clip before, but it was a Jordy Nelson video, kind of about like his whole career. And like 6 minutes into the video, he's telling the story of the Super Bowl that they won, and he's talking about his first touchdown in that Super Bowl. And he said Rodgers gave him a signal that basically meant like, go, I'm throwing it to you. And he said earlier that year he had missed that signal. Like he didn't get it. Like he didn't see it or didn't understand it or like didn't comprehend. And they showed a clip where he stops his route early and Rodgers cut through to him. And Jordy wasn't there because he didn't see the signal. So like, I think, and I think that goes back to a lot of the issues that we saw with these rookies this year. Was like Rodgers kept saying they weren't, they were running the wrong routes, and that could correlate with.
So then it seems like he wants Christian Watson to do things that he did with Jordy without telling Watson what he's expecting.
Right, and
that's ridiculous.
And the Randall Cobb, my conversation with Randall Cobb was really interesting because I said, like, Randall was like, yeah, I asked Randall, I was like, okay, Rodgers was in his 4th season when you were a rookie. Randall had 25 catches as a rookie, so was really hardly involved. Randall, I asked him, was Aaron as detailed and intricate as he is now in his 4th year? And Randall said, yeah. And that's why I didn't play. He's like, I played like 10 offensive snaps a game. And I looked it up and it was like actually like 6.7. So it was like very few. He was minimally involved. And he was like, that's because I didn't get it. Like I was not ready. So, that's a 2nd round receiver. And that's why I think this year it kind of came to a bigger focus, because I have a bunch of stats in there that are not in front of me right now. But, Aaron was having to throw way more to rookies than he's ever had to. Yeah. And I mean, the first play of the season is just a great example of that. He's never opened a season by throwing to a rookie ever.
When Christian Watson dropped that pass, I mean, most of us knew the season was going to be a disaster.
Yeah. And everyone's also overreacting to Sammy Watkins' quote. Like, I mean, I don't understand the problem with his quote. He said, if Christian catches that pass, we win the game. And it changes the trajectory of the season. What? I don't understand why that's a problem.
Oh, we had this discussion like 2 months ago.
That's literally a fact. They would have scored on that play. Like, I mean, I don't understand. Yes, sure. Maybe he's like overstating one play, possible.
Well, like, if that reaction's coming from Vikings fans, don't worry about them.
No, it's coming from Packers. Like,
well,
Packers
we're really stupid. And
Packers players Packers fans are like, well, Sammy hasn't done anything. Like, how could he talk about that?
We don't judge us on this.
Sammy threw 2 great blocks last week or the week before the bye. So you know what? Sammy is contributing in a helpful way. Like, yeah. Anyways, what else was I going to say? Oh, the other thing I thought was really interesting is that Jordan Love said, this came from Love, who, has not been there for 3 years. He said, one of the hard parts about signals is that Rodgers will just bring one back from like 5 years ago.
Yeah, that sucks.
And he won't really like explain it. And like literally Jordan's quote was like, yeah, like it happens all the time. Like we'll see it. I'll be on the sideline. I'll be like, what was that? And then someone will ask me, what was that? And I'll be like, I don't know. And then he said, you had to go ask him. Like, so that's another part.
That's so unnecessary.
Right. And so it's like, okay, even if, like, I'm sure by now, Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, they know all the signals by now. They should know all the signals by now. But they may not know one next week. Like, he might just throw one out there next week that is something.
Yeah, he'll be like, oh, I did that at Butte Community College with Jack receiver, man. You got to know that.
Right. Exactly. So, like, that's a really interesting part. Like, I think Jace Sternberger, I didn't put this quote in there. And actually, now that I'm remembering it, I probably should have. But Jace was like, yeah, like he'll throw one out from like 5 years ago. And I'll be like, dude, I was like a junior in high school, like, so that was like funny. Anyways.
How was Jordan? Like,
Jordan
people are wondering like, oh, Jordan Love's trying to say this stuff to cut underneath.
No, when I talked to Jordan after the Bears game, after the Bears win in the locker room, I just like beelined straight to him because obviously no one was talking to him. So I went straight to him because I was like, oh, I know because of my conversations with the other players that he's the one who like runs the signal meetings now because Aaron,
Rodgers made him do it.
Yeah, Aaron delegated that to him. I actually think that's maybe good, like to get him more involved. I don't know. I think that's fine. I don't really read into that in any way,
okay.
But
I just feel like if Love ever takes over for Rodgers, if Love's going to be like, all right, first thing, we're not doing these meetings anymore.
Yeah. So Jordan was not salty. People were tweeting like, oh, he's salty. No, he was like I just approached him and I was like, hey, I want to ask you a couple things about, what it's like to be a backup here. I heard you run the signal meetings. And then I was like, I also want to talk about, why it's hard for rookies to transition into this offense as receivers. And he was like, totally cool. And like, I don't really know why people are surprised that people would go on the record about this. It's not controversial. I mean, maybe anything to do with Aaron Rodgers, people like somehow think is controversy, but like,
yes,
this is just like literally that. I just see this story as like inside the offensive meeting room. Like what's happening in there? Now we know a little bit more about what's happening and we know a little bit more about why it's hard. And I think I was talking to Peter Bukowski yesterday with Locked On Packers. And he was like, well, what's your like takeaway from this? Like, did you have a conclusion? And I'm like, not necessarily. I think just the main conclusion And obviously, I only reported this about Aaron in Green Bay. I didn't do the same study on Tom Brady or Drew Brees or, insert any other old, long tenured quarterback. I was just looking at Rodgers, but I'm pretty sure this would probably hold up if you looked at what it's like to play with Tom Brady as a rookie wide receiver. Like, I think it's just natural that it's probably easier to be a rookie wide receiver with a quarterback who is younger in his career and more flexible, or maybe not even necessarily younger and more flexible, but like less elite and like less set in their ways.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be better, but it's just going to be an easier transition to learning a new NFL offense, feeling comfortable in it, getting integrated in it. I think it'll definitely, I think what I learned is that it seems like it would be easier to be in that position with a quarterback who is not, a veteran who's been around for 15 years in their job and won MVP and won a Super Bowl and all of that. So I think that's my main takeaway.
Kalyn Kahler, I appreciate your work and you coming on here. You can find her at Kalyn Kahler. She's with The Athletic. And now we've got a full weekend of NFL to watch. So
I know there's games on in like 20 minutes or something.
Why? Yeah, I think the Vikings started.
Or now. Yeah, it's noon.
Yeah, so I'm getting the hell out of here. Yeah. And I saw a cockroach. I was looking, there's a cockroach in my basement.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I got stuff to do. But I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And we'll be sure to reach out again.
Okay, bye.